right? Is this on right? Is this on right? It's okay. I'm going to share a very personal and yet public story with you today. In 2005, I worked at Iwana and Asheville Ballroom, but I was frustrated because I knew I could do more than what I was doing, and I was also tired of being that quiet girl and being too afraid to live my life authentically. You see, I grew up in a critical and extremely judgmental environment where appearance meant everything and feelings were ignored. For most of my life, I had never let anyone know the real me because I believed if they really knew me, I would get the criticism and rejection I knew all too well, and I wasn't willing to risk that. But in 2005, I resolved to find my voice and to use it. 4 months later, I was asked to start Sophie Magazine. It was the most validating thing that had ever happened to me. I was thrilled, and I couldn't wait to get started. But I had to wait because that same month I was diagnosed with skin cancer. It was on my scalp, and it had spread and attached to my skull. I had to have surgery to remove the cancer, and I was left with a large hole in my head. It looked as if someone had taken a cookie cutter and cut out my scalp. It was pretty horrible. I remember looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't even recognize my own reflection. It was shocking. And seeing myself look so awful brought back old memories and feelings of doubt and insecurity. I had lived most of my life believing that I would be judged on my appearance, and I had worked so hard to hide my true self. And there I stood with this open, horrible wound right above my forehead. I knew the physical wound would eventually heal, and it would someday quit hurting and become a scar. But the emotional wound was going to take more time and more work. I had to get to know myself on a new level. I couldn't hide any longer. At first, I became quite depressed. The wound was hideous, and it seemed to stare back at me, daring me to give up. While the wound was fresh and the shock of it was new, I often felt like crying. But I trained myself to ignore my feelings and become expressionless because the pain of facial muscles tensing up was unbearable. I wore a scarf to work to cover up the bandage, and I remember going back that first day. I was so worried at how my coworkers would react. I even had a friend tell me I should use the back door to avoid seeing anyone. But by then, it was now or never. I had just gone through something so traumatic, something that would change my life forever, and I had to learn to live with it. So I walked in through the front door. 3 months later, the wound finally healed enough to wear a wig. It was scary. Because again, I didn't know how people would react. Would they laugh? Would they think I was a freak? It didn't come easily. But I finally came to a place in my mind and in my heart where I made the decision to accept what happened and have fun with wigs. Now, I may have short hair one day, long hair the next. You just never know. My cancer was a gift. It forced me to look inside myself, find my strength, and learn to accept who I am, scars and all. This ugly, disfiguring hole, this ugly, disfiguring hole in my head actually helped me become stronger and happier because for the first time in my life, I felt accepted by others in spite of how I looked. I've learned that life's challenges help us discover who we are. In fact, when we face them and find our strength, courage, and sensitivity, we're on the road to becoming whole. The scalping, as I call it, made me realize that I had not done so many things because I was afraid. I had lived so much of my life worrying about how I would be judged by others, and I had let those fears hold me back. Some people say everything happens for a reason. I don't know if that's true. I only know that my winding road led me to where I am now. It's remarkable to me that Sophie Magazine and the scalping happened in the same year that my New Year's resolution was to find my voice. This story is personal because it's my hair, but it's public because that October I published the first issue of Sophie, and I wrote my first editorial on the scalping. I didn't want to hide any longer. My quiet voice became very loud with Sophie. My thoughts are printed in 15,000 magazines each month. I have to risk rejection just to do my job, and now I'm willing to do that. My passion and purpose is to help others understand that, that sometimes what seems like the worst thing is actually the best thing. That was hard.